Well, happy Father's Day to you guys. Hey, if you've been with us probably for the last 5 weeks or less, I just want to introduce myself. So my name's Will Deal, and no, I'm not a guest speaker, but I am the lead pastor here. It has been great for me to be able to get away for a little while. That every 7 years we give our full-time pastors, we give them a 4-week study leave for them to just get away, recharge, to be able to pull away from ministry for a season so that you can just recharge yourself and come back and be able to hit the ground running. And so I was able to be on that because we have such an incredible staff team here that I was able to do that just worry and hassle-free. That if you were here for any of those weeks, James did a great job of teaching the series Shattered. Didn't he? Yeah. That Dave did an incredible job just continuing to lead our children's ministry. That Corey just leading our youth ministry as a temporary transition leader for us, and continuing to lead our community impact ministry and some of our executive stuff from the offices. To our office staff with Roxanne, with Amy, with Lori, you guys were just in good hands for me to be able to be gone that long. And so I was able to just be away, worry-free and hassle, just recharge, and I'm certainly glad to be back. Well, it is Father's Day, and we've got a message for you today that's going to be geared towards dads, whether you're going to be a future dad, whether you're a dad that's in the middle of raising kids, whether you're a dad that you have adult children. This is going to relate to you. If you're somebody that you're a single woman and you might get married again one day, or you might get married for the first time one day, that this can be a great message for you to hear, because we're going to talk about what a father should be doing, what a father's called to be doing. And so it's going to help you be able to look and see, well, what should I be looking for when it comes to looking for a godly man? When it comes to parenting is just this very unusual thing that most of us end up getting involved with at some point. And when I think about parenting and how it gets started, when we get started with parenting, we take these kids and we go from kind of holding these toddlers, and moms really love this particular stage, and dads kind of get excited once they start crawling and trying to teach them how to walk, and they start learning to walk, and we work so hard to get them up on their feet and start walking around, and we work so hard to get them to start talking, and we keep trying to teach them things, and sometimes it can even be a competition between mom and dad. Is he going to say mama first? Is he going to say dada first? And what's going to be the very first word? And then we try to get them to talk even more and even more. And we work so hard all the way till they're about here. And then something happens about here, and instead of trying to teach them to get up and walk, and instead of trying to get them to keep on talking, it's like, sit down and be quiet. Did we just keep, hey, just sit down and be quiet. I remember reading about Mark Twain and just kind of how he saw his dad as he was growing up. And he said when he was 14 years old, he said his old man was so ignorant that he could hardly stand to be around the guy. And then when he got to the age of 21, he just stopped and observed his father and what it was like being around his father. And he said he was so astonished at how much his father learned in 7 years. Now, sometimes it takes us growing up to be able to appreciate our dads and the role that they have and all that they're doing for us. When we live with dads, whether you had your actual dad that you got to grow up with, or whether you just think of a grandfather figure that was in your life, or maybe if you're that dad right now, or you're somebody that you're just seeing somebody actively father right now, there's this like world according to dad. And in the world according to dad, it's these things that dads just keep saying. They just keep repeating. These are just things that are just kind of innate, that if you're a father, this is what you're going to say, at least something along these lines. That once you become a father and your kids actually start talking to you and start doing things in life, that it's not too uncommon for dads to keep repeating this. Do you think I'm made of money? Right? That's we do that. That as our kids are growing up, that dads are often found starting a sentence like this. When I was your age. And then we have to listen and listen. And we have to remind, Dad, you've said that so many times, I could tell it better than you. I know that one. that the world according to Dad, that we're going to hear dads often, we're going to hear dads say something just like this. Because I said so. So that's total dad. Because I said so. I'm the authority. Don't challenge me. It's because I said so. It's almost as if when you're a dad, that if you hear the word why, it's just automatic. Because I said so. Somebody say why? Oh, because I said so. And we just do. We say this. And the one that's probably the nearest and dearest to my heart that I think about growing up with my father, who's here right here, is that my dad said this to me way too many times. This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. I just wanted, Dad, to say, don't hurt yourself. Don't bother. You don't need to hurt yourself, Dad. It's okay. Yeah, the world according to Dad. But being a great father requires more than just being remembered for a few statements you keep repeating over the years. That being a great father requires so much more than that. And when a father doesn't interact enough, when a father doesn't encourage enough, when a father doesn't come along and say, I want to express my love to you and touch you in a way that's appropriate and hug you and help you to feel good about who you are. When a father doesn't encourage enough, it does something on the inside to a person growing up that you never outgrow, that you never get past. And for me saying that right now, chances are in a group this large, there are many of you that when I say that, it hurts. And it reminds you of some of the hurts that you have. It just shows how important a father's love is. A father being involved, a father that comes along and he's involved in their kids' life and he loves their kids and he expresses that he believes in them. Because when a father does this, when the father loves you in appropriate ways and hugs you and encourages you and lets you know that they're proud of you, when they're supporting you, when a father comes along and does this, it does something inside that lasts a lifetime, that equips you for life. See, this is why we're going to spend some time this morning talking about the role of a father. Because most people's view of themselves is limited by how their father treated them. That is limited by how their father treated them, how involved their father was in their life. And the more that a father's involved and loving and caring, the less of a limit that we have. And it's like fathers have the opportunity to leverage their role to help their kids grow up and be just incredibly secure. It's what we must do as dads. We're going to look at Psalms chapter 127. In this book of Psalms, this Psalm 127, we're going to look at the entire chapter, which is just comprised of 5 verses, and this was written by a guy named Solomon. And Solomon, who's in the Old Testament during this time period, he is attributed as being the wisest person of his time. Some even say that he is the wisest person who has ever lived, the wisest man. This wisdom is something that he actually asked God for, that God had let him know through a vision. You could ask me of anything, and I will grant it to you. And he asked God for wisdom, and God granted it to him. And many, many times when we're reading through the book of Psalms, many times these are songs that are done that it's about singing and praising God. But every once in a while you come across one of these psalms and it's about something that's shared to others. And it's meant to be a song that was sung, but sometimes it's meant to be, hey, this is for you. And this happens to be one of those. So Psalm 127, starting in verse 1, Solomon said, unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. That if we go around trying to build our house, our home, without God's involvement, it's wasted. And unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. That Solomon understood the critical role of involving God in your life. He says it's useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones. That God even said, hey, listen, 6 days are for work, and he modeled it, creating the world, and on the seventh that he rested. And he wants us to find rest. You know, when I think of dads, it's too easy for us to fall into one of two extremes. That we can fall over here into this extreme of just being lazy. That we're just lazy. You know, we're going to go do our minimal work, put in a minimal effort, and then we're going to come home and we're just going to make it all about us. And hey, it's what I want to watch on TV. It's what I want to eat. It's when I want it. And it's too easy to just fall over here into this extreme of being lazy. But there's a whole nother extreme that's just as easy to fall into. And it's the extreme of being a workaholic. And that we would just work and we work and we work. Maybe it's because we find success at our work and we kind of struggle at home, so we just stay involved in the work. Maybe it's because we convince ourselves, it's because I love my family so much, and this is how I say I love you. Here you go. Here you go. Oh, here, I love you. And so we just keep working hard so that we can say I love you with the greenbacks. But it's so easy to fall into this extreme as well. And dads, we've got to be balanced. We've got to be balanced to where we don't make our life all about our career and all about climbing the next step and thinking, oh, when I get to the next step, then I'll have more time for my family. Because if you try that path, by the time your family's gone, you'll finally arrive. And so we've got to be careful. We must find this balance. Solomon goes on. He says, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him. And you know, most of the time, we can relate to that. Most of the time, we're like, we can sense that. We can feel it. Oh, this is such a reward. But there's sometimes it might feel like retribution in the moment. But we'll get past that. And we'll recognize the reward that they are. And then Solomon, understanding the culture that he was in, and speaking to them in a way that he knew that most of the people that would be reading this and singing this would understand. He said, children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hands. And for you and I, that's kind of difficult for us to comprehend and understand and see the significance of what he meant by this. And so we found a video, our creative team did, and we found a video that shares with us some of the significance of what it would mean to be a trained, skilled warrior that knows how to use a bow and arrow. So I want you guys to see this.
Centuries ago, master archers were able to perform incredible feats of archery. These skills have long since been forgotten, but the Danish archer Lars Andersen is trying to reinvent what has been lost. He uses forgotten historical methods and holds all his arrows in the same hand he shoots with. Once, this technique was widespread, and Assyrian artwork shows that the method is at least 5,000 years old. Using this technique, Lars has set several speed shooting records and shoots more than twice as fast as his closest competitors. And being able to shoot fast is just one of the benefits of the method. But the big question is, why has it been forgotten today? About 10 years ago, Lars started using a bow. The arrows he carried in a quiver on his back. Surprisingly, the quiver turned out to be useless when it came to moving fast. The back quiver is a Hollywood myth and was not common in the past, but it is still spread all over the world. Why? Because modern archers do not move. These archers also started placing the arrow on the left side of the bow, just as archers do in movies. However, placing the arrow left around the bow is not good while you're in motion. By placing the arrow on the left side, your hand is on the wrong side of the string, so you need several movements before you can actually shoot. From studying old pictures of archers, Lars discovered that some historical archers held their arrows on the right side of the bow. This means that the arrow can be drawn and fired in one single motion, which is both faster and better. And this was not the only problem with archery today. Lars realized that what we thought was historical archery only works well for modern target archery and Hollywood films. If he wanted to learn to shoot like the master archers of old, he would have to unlearn what he had learned and start reading historical manuscripts instead. He would have to find his way back to a time when archery was simpler and more natural. A war archer must have total control over his bow in all situations, and must be able to handle his bow and arrows in a controlled way under the most varied of circumstances. The old manuscripts told Lars that master archers could shoot the bow with both hands and still hit the target, so he began practicing. It is also described that an archer in motion must be able to hit a blade so that the arrow splits in two parts, like this. Archers could also pick up enemy arrows and shoot them back, or grab arrows while on the move and fire them rapidly. There are even myths of archers who could grab an enemy's arrow and shoot it back at him. Lars took it a step further and is now able to catch an arrow while jumping and fire it before he hits the ground. Perhaps most importantly, modern slow archery has led people to believe that war archers only shot at long distances. However, Lars found that they could shoot at any distance, even up close. This does require the ability to fire fast though. In the beginning, archers probably drew arrows from quivers or belts, but since then, they started holding the arrows in the bow hand, and later in the draw hand. Taking it to this third level, that of holding arrows in the draw hand, requires immense practice and skill, and only professional archers, hunters, and so on would have had the time for it. When guns started replacing bows, this technique was forgotten, and the only reason Lars is able to do it is because he's spent years practicing intensely. Works in all positions, and while in motion, whether rolling, running, or on horseback. And while there is no doubt that those war archers of the past were stronger and more fit than Lars is, his arrows still penetrate chainmail armor and the heavy gambesson worn beneath it. Manuscripts tell us that it was common to hold 3 arrows in the draw hand at once, while keeping more in a belt quiver. We know that some archers held more, and in a way, the bow was the ultimate weapon. Who can escape 10 arrows fired quickly after another? From old texts, we know that Saracen archers were expected to be able to fire 3 arrows in 1.5 seconds, and very skilled archers were even faster. Lars has managed to shoot 3 arrows in 0.6 seconds, but while speed is important, hitting the target is essential. To test accuracy and speed at the same time, Lars set up an experiment where he shot incoming arrows with arrows of his own. But he took it one step further. In the 1938 movie, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Robin Hood splits an arrow down the middle. Some consider this the ultimate archery trick. They're wrong. No! The ultimate archery trick is splitting an incoming arrow in 2 with one of your own. We do not recommend you trying this at home.
And we certainly don't recommend that you try any of that. So, but definitely want us to be able to look and see what we could understand about what the original audience was hearing when they were thinking about and hearing this verse about children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hand. You know, as a father, it's so easy for me to be proud of my children. And so when we're proud of our children, we like to brag on them, we like to talk about them. And so I actually came across a couple of photos that was taken 3 summers ago with our kids. And so here's one of Miri, and she didn't know this was coming, so she's getting to look at that and feel all small and embarrassed right now. But you look at her, and when I was actually looking at the way that she was holding the arrow on that bow, I was kind of like, hey, she's doing that like Lars is talking about. You just put it on the outside and just pull, and because she's a lefty. And so there she is. She's just all smiles and happy that she's hitting a target. And then here's one of Noah. And he's like, yeah, I'm a hunter. Yeah, I hunt. You know, and there he is. And you can look and you can see the bullseye 3 times right there with the arrows. And, you know, I didn't teach either one of my kids how to shoot. But one thing that I think Noah has picked up from me, and probably Miri too, is, hey, there's nothing wrong with looking good, right? And so, but the only problem with that one is those arrows are coming in from 3 different angles, and it's kind of obvious that he staged that. But we'll work on that later. But here Solomon is wanting us to understand children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hands. How joyful is the man whose quiver is full of them. He will not be put to shame when he confronts his accusers at the city gate. That there's some underlying understanding here that Solomon had when he was writing this. And the underlying understanding is that dads, that you're involved with your kids. That dads, you train your kids. That dads, you have a kind of connection with your kids. That not only do you watch them grow up with you defending them, but when they grow up, they will defend you. And he knew the importance of the kind of family connection that dads would need to have with their children. That dads would need to understand that when it comes to children, they're these arrows, they're weapons in our hands. And God has a great plan for our children. And so we need to do our job as dads, helping to promote God's plan. Now, moms, I probably don't need to say this, but I will. Moms, you serve a very unique role as well in the lives of your children. And last time I was with you guys was Mother's Day. And I taught on Mother's Day an encouraging message to you guys as moms, building you up, sharing with you the strengths that you just naturally have and you naturally bring to the family. But today we're going to talk to dads. And I think that any woman in here would want me to talk to dads and share this message with dads, whether it's the future dads or the current dads. Because when it comes to dads, they do serve a unique role as well. And the less that a father is involved with his kids, that moms, the more of a gap you try to fill. The more of a gap you try to cover. And you work hard and hard, do all that you can. But you realize you still fall short. And so this is why it's important for us to talk to dads. Researchers, Sean Brotherson and Joseph White, in their book, Why Fathers Count, the importance of fathers and their involvement with children. They spend their entire book compiling all of the data and the research showing the impact that happens in a kid's life with a father that's loving and involved, and when a father is minimally involved, and when a father's not involved. And what their research, what they concluded, which is what many of us have already figured out, is children with active fathers in their life that are actively loving them and helping nurture and grow them up. The children that have these dads in their life have fewer behavioral problems. The children with active fathers in their life, they do better academically. And children with active fathers in their life are better off economically and socially. That it is a win for our kids, for the dads to be involved. And my prayer is that the dads will live up to their unique role. That they'll live up to their unique role, whether I'm talking to some future dads, dads that are in the thick of raising, or dads that have already set your kids free. That we will live up to our God-given role of raising our kids. See, arrows aren't meant to just be kept safe in a quiver. They're meant to be released with purpose. And that's what we must do as dads. And so welcome to Arrow Crafting 101. And so an arrow has 5 key elements or 5 key components. It has a shaft, it has a knock, it has fletching, has an insert, and has a tip. And so we're just going to look at how each of these pieces matter in the life of raising our children. So this is a shaft, an arrow shaft. And when it comes to the arrow shaft, this is where we start with. And when you think of the shaft, what I want you to think of is I want you to think of identity. I want you to think of that your children's identity, that this is where we start. That every person is born with a unique divine imprint of a purpose for their life, a divine imprint of identity. And the dads, we must come along and help our kids discover their divine imprint. That we've got to help them discover the physical identity that God gave them is theirs, and it's a good identity, and this is who God created them to be. And it's our role to help them see that and to be secure in their skin. The dads, it's our role to come along and help build in them their emotional identity, that they would find joy in life and that they would be secure in life because they are strong emotionally and that they have a strong emotional identity. The dads, that we would be involved in our kids' life to help them understand their sexual identity and the purpose for that and the timing in which that should come along for their life. And we should be helping them see that, their sexual identity, and seeing that's saved for marriage. And that should be our role to help them see that and discover that. We need to help them with that. And then they have a spiritual identity. That we should be helping to point them to the Heavenly Father, helping them to see Jesus as their Savior, helping them to see the spiritual identity for which God created them for. And maybe perhaps the greatest message that we could ever instill in our kids is that you are created in the image of God. God values you. He values you. And the more that we can keep pointing them for them to see how much God values them, the more they'll see how much we value them. It is a win-win. In Genesis 1:27 it says, "So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." So what comes along next? Well, next we have the knock. The knock. And the knock is something that it is a friction insert. And so when we take and we have this knock that we get in the shaft, we put it in and we insert it and we have to twist it and we have to get it just tight, but it's not glued. It's just friction inserted. And once we get that set, we get it set just right to where it's rooted and it's seated all the way in and it's straight. Now everything else that's going to end up attaching to the shaft aligns with the knock. So when we think of the knock, we need to think of relationships. Of all the relationships that's going to come along, the relationship that they should have with their Heavenly Father, the relationship that they're going to have with you, their earthly father, with their mom, with their siblings, with their friends. That we need to make sure that the knock is seated and it's rooted firmly. That because it's just friction fit, it can work its way loose every once in a while. So this is something we have to come along and constantly monitor, is where they're at with their relationships. And all the power of the bow is of no value if it cannot be effectively transferred. And so the knock has to be sitting properly. And dads, our kids are learning a lot about relationships, not by what we say, but by our actions, by observing us. That what they observe in us, not what we say, but what they observe in us, is what they learn about what it means to have a committed relationship. That what they observe in us is what they begin to understand, well, what are friendships, and what is that to be, and what kind of priority should a friendship have compared to family relationships? And it's by observing us that they're learning this. That what they learn by observation is they learn just how much family should be valued or doesn't need to be valued by what they observe in us. That when we teach our kids truth, that if we try to teach them truth without a relationship, it's too easy for that to just result in rebellion. So we must have a good relationship with our kids. I like what Dennis Rainey had to say about this matter with relationships. Dennis Rainey is a family ministry leader, has a ministry called Family Life. And he said, the best school to learn about relationships and resolving conflict is the University of Family, where the professors teach and train their students for more than 18 years. It's the best place. Well, the third thing that comes along for the crafting of an arrow is fletching. And fletching, or originally feathers, that you would take and you would add these, and where you add them is you put them near the rear of the bow. That you put them at the hind end, at the tail end, I'm sorry, I said bow, didn't I? Of the arrow. And so you put them there, and so when you put them there, it serves a couple of purposes. The fletching, it actually creates a drag. It actually holds the arrow, this part of it, back, and it lets the front of the arrow move forward. It keeps the point pointed in the right direction. Without fletching properly attached, it leaves the arrow to just tumble. And when we think about fletching, we need to think about discipline. It's the discipline that we bring. You know, discipline is a word that once had a good reputation, but it doesn't seem to have that good of a reputation anymore. But we need to be disciplining our kids. It's critical to raising children. And discipline is a loving gift that we give to our kids that lasts a lifetime. It's a loving gift that we give to them. So when you think of discipline, think of it this way. Here's a definition that I've worked up that I think pretty much fulfills the role of discipline. Discipline develops character by enforcing consequences when behaviors miss expressed expectations. That's discipline. It comes along and it's there for the purpose of developing character. But it only develops character when we enforce the consequences. But we should only enforce the consequences when the behaviors miss the expressed expectations. That we've taken the time to do that with our children. And just like fletching prevents an arrow from tumbling, the discipline can prevent our kids from tumbling as they fly through life if we come along and we discipline them with love. Well, the fourth thing that we will look at, the fourth thing is this little piece right here. And this piece is called an insert. And the insert that you put inside of the shaft is something that you don't just put in there by itself, but you glue it in to the front end. And the purpose of the insert is so that a tip can be mounted. And so you have to glue that in so that it'll stay firm and so that tip can be screwed in and secured. And when you think of an insert, I want you to think of character. Because see, the insert's what goes inside. And our character is what's inside of us. And character, it is forged through discipline. That the discipline has to be there first before the character will come along. And we want to build character in our children. And what I've noticed is that children who are disciplined by their fathers, that they're disciplined in love, that these are children that are more than likely to begin to develop something that we call self-discipline. That they saw the discipline coming, the discipline helped to course correct, and they began to go, I need to be self-disciplined. And so here's a working definition of self-discipline. Self-discipline is choosing to go without now because a greater reward in the future is worth the wait. That's self-discipline. Is that when you begin, no, I'm going to go without this now because there's something greater to have if I will wait in the future to be able to have that. Character is responsibility. That's what it is. The character is our ability to respond to whatever the circumstance and the situation is. It is responsibility. And it's character development that it leads to trust. That character development, it leads to dependability. It leads to respect. It leads to moral excellence. So character development is important. And the last one, to be able to complete our arrow, it's the tip. It's the tip. And the tip we put right into the insert, and we screw that down. And there it is, and it sits right there. And when you think of the tip, I want you to think of purpose. It's purpose. What's the purpose? What is it that we want that arrow to do? Where is it we want that arrow to go? What kind of impact do we want this arrow to make when we release it? Purpose. And the purpose you pick for raising your kids is the invisible leader in your family. So what's your purpose? Is your purpose, hey, I just want you to excel academically? And you just drive the grades. Is that the purpose? Get into a good college. Get a scholarship. Is that the purpose? Nothing wrong with that happening, but it shouldn't be the purpose. Is the purpose just, hey, just make sure that you're the best jock ever? Excel, get that letter early. Is that the purpose? Is the purpose just to make sure that they're serving the rest of the family and waiting on you hand and foot? Is that the purpose? What's the purpose? Because the purpose you pick is the silent leader in your home. And I think that Jesus took the time to make it really clear what the purpose should be. See, Jesus was asked a question, what's the greatest commandment? And we get to see his response to that question. It's recorded in the book of Mark, chapter 12. Pick this up in verse 29. It says, Jesus replied, the most important commandment is this: listen, O Israel, the Lord our God is the one and only Lord. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. That these are the greatest commandments. He sums it up. He says, love God, love people. Love God, love people. What's the purpose that you're picking? Because I think that we should be picking the purpose of love God and love people. That there's this phrase out there when it comes to archery. It's called aim small, miss small. And so what it's telling you is if you'll make sure that you pick a small target and that you just keep aiming for the small target, that's all you aim for, then you'll miss small. You'll just barely be away from that. But if you just aim broad, you're going to miss broad. So we've got to aim small. Let me wrap it up with this. The archer's paradox. Don't know if you've heard of this, but the archer's paradox is this: that when you release the arrow, the paradox is that the arrow, as it flies off and vibrates right away, right off of the string, the bowstring, it actually instantly veers off course. And then as it stiffens up, it gets right back on point to hit what it was aimed for. It's called the archer's paradox. So there it is. When it first goes out, it's a little wobbly, and then it starts to stiffen, and it comes right back on point. I think Solomon knew about this because he wrote about this in one other place. Proverbs chapter 22:6. Direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. I think Solomon had some experience, and he was the wisest man. I think he'd had some experience of releasing some kids when they were young, and he watched them vibrate and wiggle off, and they were off course. Just like the archer's paradox. But he had poured so much into them that he could see as they got older that they stiffened up and they went right back on point. Dads, don't ever give up on your kids. Don't ever let them even think that you've given up on them. Because they're looking to you, they're leaning into you, they're leaning into us more than what we could ever understand. Not to take away anything from the way they lean into their moms, but the way that they lean into their dads is a unique way. They're counting on us. Dads, let's be the blessing that our kids are begging us to be. It's Father's Day. And maybe there's a dad out there that's dreading today because today you're going, it's a special day. It's supposed to be for dads. And I know my kids won't call. I know my kids won't reach out to me. Don't wait. Reach out to them. You call them today, if that's the repeated scenario year after year. You reach out to them today. And you call them and you just let them know, I was thinking of you and I love you. Just wanted to hear your voice. Let's be the dads our kids are begging us to be. Pray with me. God, you've given us unique roles as parents. And God, as a dad, our role is to get them out of the quiver to where we would launch them into the world to make an impact, Jesus, with your love in this world. Help us so that we can be equipped so that we can do this. Help grow us so that we can grow them. May we be the dads that you've created us to be so our kids can be all that you intended them to be. Jesus, it's in your name we pray. Amen.